The Appalachian Mountains in North Carolina held a beauty that could steal your breath, a tapestry of emerald and sapphire stretching as far as the eye could see. But for Sarah Miller, a freelance paranormal investigator with a penchant for the truly unsettling, the beauty was always laced with a prickle of unease. Her latest obsession, the abandoned Whispering Pines Asylum. Locals spun tales of it in hushed tones, whispers carried on the wind like the rustling of the very pines that gave the place its name. Stories of unspeakable suffering, experimental procedures gone wrong, and the lingering cries of the forgotten souls trapped within its decaying walls. Most dismissed them as folklore, the product of an isolated community's overactive imagination. But Sarah, armed with her EMF reader, thermal camera, and a healthy dose of morbid curiosity, believed in the echoes of pain. The asylum sat on a remote, overgrown hill, its Gothic architecture silhouetted against the bruised twilight sky. Broken windows stared out like vacant eyes, and the air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic and faintly acrid. A rusted sign, barely clinging to its post, read, "Whispering Pines, dedicated to healing." The irony was a cold knot in Sarah's stomach. She'd arrived late, wanting to catch the shift in energy that often occurred as night deepened. Her small SUV, affectionately nicknamed Spectre, was parked a safe distance down the winding dirt track, swallowed by the encroaching woods. Armed with a flashlight that cut a weak swath through the gloom, Sarah approached the imposing gates. They groaned in protest as she pushed them open, the sound echoing eerily in the stillness. The grounds were a chaotic mess of overgrown weeds and fallen branches. A chilling wind whispered through the pines, sounding uncannily like hushed voices. Sarah felt the familiar thrill tinged with apprehension that always accompanied her investigations. This place felt different, colder, more malevolent. Her first point of entry was the main administration building, its grand facade now marred by decay. Inside, dust lay thick as a shroud, coating overturned furniture and scattered documents. The air was heavy, pressing down on her chest. Her EMF reader flickered erratically, jumping between negligible and alarming levels. Something was here. As she moved deeper into the asylum, the layout became disturbingly clear. Long, narrow corridors stretched out like skeletal fingers, lined with what were once patient rooms. Peeling paint revealed layers of forgotten wallpaper, and in some rooms, rusted restraints still clung to the decaying beds. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the creaking of the old building settling and the frantic thumping of Sarah's own heart. In one room, she found a child's drawing, faded and torn, depicting a stick figure being chased by a shadowy, elongated form. A wave of sadness washed over her, a stark reminder of the human tragedies that had unfolded within these walls. Hours passed in a tense dance between anticipation and dread. Sarah documented everything, her camera capturing the eerie stillness and the subtle anomalies her instruments detected. She heard faint whispers, too indistinct to understand but undeniably present. Her thermal camera picked up cold spots that defied logical explanation, areas where the temperature plummeted inexplicably. She ventured into what she believed was the surgical wing. The air here was thick with a coppery tang, and the shadows seemed to writhe with a life of their own. A large operating table stood in the center of the room, stained and scarred. The metallic scent was overpowering here, mingling with a cloying sweetness that made Sarah's stomach churn. Suddenly, a door at the far end of the corridor slammed shut with a deafening bang. Sarah froze, her flashlight beam fixed on the now still door. The silence that followed was even more terrifying than the noise. She held her breath, listening intently. Nothing. Just the whisper of the wind outside. "Hello?" Her voice was barely a whisper itself, swallowed by the vastness of the building. No response. She cautiously approached the door, her hand trembling as she reached for the rusted handle. It was cold to the touch. She pulled, and the door creaked open, revealing a darkened room. As her flashlight beam swept across the space, she saw rows upon rows of shelves, filled with jars. Her breath hitched in her throat. Preserved specimens. Human organs. Deformed fetuses. The grotesque display was a testament to the horrors that had allegedly taken place here. Sarah felt a wave of nausea, the cloying sweetness in the air now identifiable as the sickly scent of formaldehyde. She backed away slowly, her mind reeling. This was beyond just residual energy. This was a place steeped in darkness, a repository of suffering. As she turned to leave the room, she saw it, a shadow, tall and gaunt, flickering at the edge of her vision. It was fleeting, gone before she could fully focus. but the impression of a malevolent presence sent a jolt of pure terror through her. She spun around, her flashlight beam dancing wildly. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice shaking. Only silence answered. Sarah knew she should leave. Every instinct screamed at her to get out of this place, but a morbid curiosity, the driving force behind her investigations, held her rooted to the spot. She had to know more. She continued her exploration, moving deeper into the asylum's labyrinthine corridors. In what appeared to be a former patient's room, she found a journal hidden beneath a loose floorboard. Its pages were brittle and yellowed with age, the ink faded but still legible. The journal belonged to a patient named Elias Thorne, admitted in the early 1900s. His entries started with hopeful optimism, speaking of the doctors and their promises of a cure. But as the pages turned, the tone grew increasingly desperate, filled with accounts of brutal experiments, inhumane treatment, and the growing sense of despair that consumed the patients. One entry, dated just days before the journal abruptly ended, spoke of a shadow doctor, a figure who conducted horrific procedures in the dead of night, his face always obscured. Elias wrote of a chilling lullaby this figure would hum, a melody that promised oblivion. As Sarah read the last entry, a faint humming reached her ears. It was soft, almost imperceptible, but undeniably there. A cold dread washed over her. The humming grew slightly louder, seeming to emanate from the depths of the asylum. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She slowly raised her flashlight, its beam trembling. The shadows in the corridor seemed to deepen, to coalesce. The air grew heavy, charged with an unseen energy. Suddenly, a gust of icy wind swept through the corridor, extinguishing her flashlight. Sarah was plunged into absolute darkness, the humming now a clear, chilling melody that seemed to vibrate in her very bones. Panic seized her. She fumbled for her backup light, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Just as her fingers brushed against it, she heard a scraping sound behind her, followed by a low, guttural growl. Something was in the darkness with her. She whirled around, her hand now gripping the backup flashlight. She flicked it on, the weak beam cutting through the oppressive blackness. And then she saw it. A figure stood at the end of the corridor, tall and emaciated, its form shrouded in shadow. Only its eyes were visible, two glowing red pinpricks that seemed to pierce through her very soul. The humming stopped. Sarah's blood ran cold. This was not a residual haunting. This was something else. Something alive. The figure began to move, its limbs contorting in unnatural ways as it glided silently towards her. Sarah stumbled backward, her flashlight beam shaking violently. She could feel its presence, a wave of pure malice that threatened to suffocate her. She backed into a room, tripping over a pile of debris. The flashlight clattered to the floor, plunging her back into near darkness. She scrambled to her feet, her mind racing. Escape. She had to escape. She could hear the creature shuffling closer, its breathing a wet, rasping sound. The red eyes glowed in the darkness, getting closer, closer. Just as she thought all hope was lost, she remembered something Elias Thorne had written in his journal, a desperate plea scrawled in the margins of the last entry. The light. Fear is the light of mercy. Mercy. What could that possibly mean? Suddenly, an image flashed in her mind. A small, silver locket she always carried with her. A family heirloom that contained a tiny photograph of her grandmother. A woman known for her boundless compassion and unwavering faith. It was a symbol of hope, of kindness, of mercy. With a surge of adrenaline, Sarah fumbled inside her jacket, her fingers closing around the cool metal of the locket. She pulled it out, her hand shaking so violently she almost dropped it. As the creature lunged, its shadowy form looming over her, Sarah held out the locket, her eyes squeezed shut, and whispered a desperate prayer for protection, for mercy. A blinding white light erupted from the locket, searing through the darkness. Sarah cried out, shielding her eyes. When she dared to look again, the shadowy figure was gone. The oppressive cold had lifted. The chilling humming had ceased. The air felt clean. Her flashlight lay on the floor, its beam illuminating the empty corridor. The red glow was gone. The malevolent presence had vanished. Sarah stood there, trembling, the silver locket clutched tightly in her hand. What had just happened? Had the locket protected her? It seemed impossible, yet she couldn't deny what she had witnessed. She knew she had to get out of Whispering Pines. Now, she stumbled out of the asylum, the fresh night air a welcome relief against her skin. The moon hung high in the sky, casting long, eerie shadows, but they no longer seemed threatening. As she reached her SUV, she looked back at the imposing silhouette of the asylum, its broken windows like vacant eyes staring into the darkness. It seemed different, quieter, less menacing. Sarah got into her car, her hands still shaking. She started the engine, the roar a comforting sound in the stillness. As she drove away, leaving Whispering Pines behind, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just witnessed something truly extraordinary, something that defied all logical explanation. But the story of Whispering Pines was far from over. The encounter had left her with more questions than answers. What was the shadowy figure? Why did it react to the locket? And what was the light of mercy that Elias Thorne had so desperately alluded to? Sarah knew she had to return. She had to uncover the truth behind the horrors of Whispering Pines and the miracle that had saved her. The world needed to hear this story. The drive back to her small cabin felt longer than usual, the rearview mirror reflecting the haunting image of Whispering Pines etched in Sarah's mind. Sleep offered no escape, her dreams filled with shadowy figures and the chilling hum. The silver locket, which she now wore constantly around her neck, felt both like a shield and a constant reminder of the terrifying encounter. Days turned into a week, filled with restless nights and obsessive research. Sarah delved into the local history of Whispering Pines, sifting through old newspaper articles, census records, and forgotten town archives. The official records painted a picture of a progressive institution that tragically succumbed to financial woes and closed its doors in the 1950s. But the whispers, the local legends, hinted at something far darker. She found fragmented accounts of unusual experiments, rumors of a particularly cruel doctor who arrived in the early 1900s, coinciding with Elias Thorne's admission. His name was Dr. Alistair Blackwood, and the few mentions of him were always accompanied by a sense of dread. He was described as brilliant but eccentric, obsessed with the darker aspects of the human psyche. Sarah also discovered an old town legend about a series of unexplained deaths in the vicinity of the asylum. Around the same time, Elias Thorne's journal entries grew increasingly desperate. The deaths were attributed to illness or accidents, but the whispers suggested something more sinister, a shadow sickness that stole the life force of its victims. Driven by a need for answers, Sarah knew she had to return to Whispering Pines. The fear was still palpable, a cold knot in her stomach, but the mystery was a stronger pull. This time, she wouldn't go alone. She contacted a small team of trusted paranormal investigators. Then, a tech expert with an arsenal of recording equipment, and Maya, a sensitive with a remarkable ability to sense residual energies. They met at Sarah's cabin under a sky heavy with impending rain. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation and a shared sense of unease as Sarah recounted her terrifying experience and showed them the locket. Ben, ever the skeptic, ran tests on the locket. Silver is a good conductor of energy, he conceded, and it feels unusually cold. But a source of light like that? It defies physics. Maya, however, had a different reaction. As Sarah held out the locket, Maya gasped, her eyes widening. "I feel warmth," she whispered, her hand hovering over it, "and a powerful sense of peace. It's like a beacon." Armed with their equipment and a shared determination, they returned to Whispering Pines under the cloak of a stormy night. The wind howled through the pines, sounding like mournful cries, and the rain lashed down, turning the grounds into a muddy quagmire. The asylum seemed even more menacing in the storm, its dark silhouette punctuated by flashes of lightning. They entered cautiously, the beams of their flashlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. Ben set up infrared cameras and audio recorders in key locations, while Maya focused on sensing any residual energies. The atmosphere inside was immediately heavy. Maya shivered, her face pale. "The suffering here, it's immense," she whispered, like layers upon layers of pain. As they retraced Sarah's steps, the EMF reader spiked erratically in the surgical wing, the air still thick with that cloying metallic scent. The room with the preserved specimens sent a wave of nausea through them all. They found the hidden room where Sarah had discovered Elias Thorne's journal. Ben meticulously photographed the journal, while Maya focused her senses on the surrounding area. "There's a strong presence here," Maya said, her voice strained, dark and angry. "It feels connected to this room." Suddenly, one of Ben's audio recorders crackled to life, emitting a faint, chilling hum. It was the same melody Sarah had heard. The humming grew louder, filling the room with an unsettling vibration. The temperature in the room plummeted. The beam of Sarah's flashlight flickered. A shadow moved in the corner of her eye. "It's here," Sarah whispered, her hand instinctively going to the locket beneath her shirt. The shadowy figure began to materialize, its tall, gaunt form slowly taking shape in the gloom. The red eyes glowed with malevolent intensity, fixed on Sarah. Ben fumbled with his camera, trying to capture the apparition, while Maya began to chant softly, a low, rhythmic sound that seemed to vibrate in response to the humming. The creature glided towards Sarah, its movements unnatural and unsettling. The humming intensified, a painful drone that seemed to burrow into their minds. Fear gripped Sarah, but this time, she wasn't alone. Ben shone a powerful beam of ultraviolet light on the figure, causing it to recoil slightly, hissing like something burned. "It's sensitive to light," Ben exclaimed. Maya continued her chanting, her voice growing stronger, resonating with an unexpected power. A faint, warm glow began to emanate from her hands. As the creature lunged, Sarah pulled out the silver locket, its surface now radiating a soft white light. She held it aloft, directing the light towards the shadowy figure. The creature shrieked, a sound of pure agony that echoed through the asylum. Its shadowy form flickered violently, as if being consumed by the light. The red glow in its eyes dimmed, and it recoiled further, shrinking back into the darkness. The humming stopped abruptly. The oppressive cold lifted. The heavy atmosphere seemed to dissipate. The creature was gone. They stood there, breathing heavily. The silence that followed the creature's disappearance, almost as unnerving as its presence. What was that?" Ben stammered, his face pale. "Something ancient," Maya whispered, her eyes wide. "Something born of pain and suffering." They knew they had to understand what they were dealing with. They spent the rest of the night meticulously documenting their findings, reviewing the audio recordings, and analyzing the photographs. One of Ben's infrared cameras had captured a fleeting image of the shadowy figure before it vanished in the light. A gaunt, almost skeletal form with elongated limbs and those terrifying red eyes. The audio recordings contained not only the chilling hum, but also faint whispers, too distorted to understand, but laced with anguish. As dawn broke, casting a pale light through the broken windows, they gathered in the main hall, exhausted but resolute. They had faced the darkness of Whispering Pines and survived, but the mystery remained. Why was the locket so effective? What was the source of the creature's power? And what was the light of mercy that Elias Thorne had written about? They decided to focus their investigation on the history of the asylum and Dr. Alistair Blackwood. Sarah remembered Elias Thorne's mention of a shadow doctor who hummed a lullaby. Could Blackwood be the entity they encountered? Returning to the local archives, Sarah unearthed a shocking discovery. Dr. Blackwood wasn't just eccentric. He was known for his cruel and inhumane experiments on patients, driven by a twisted belief that he could unlock the secrets of life and death through pain. He disappeared without a trace around the time the unexplained deaths plagued the town, and Elias Thorne's journal ended. Further research revealed a tragic detail. Dr. Blackwood had a daughter, Ilara, who suffered from a debilitating illness. Driven by a desperate desire to save her, Blackwood's experiments became increasingly unethical and violent. Sarah found a faded photograph of Ilara. She had large, luminous eyes and a gentle smile. The photograph was tucked inside a medical record detailing her condition, a rare disease that caused immense suffering. A local legend, almost forgotten, spoke of a compassionate nurse at Whispering Pines, a woman named Clara, who dedicated herself to easing the suffering of the patients, especially Ilara. Clara was known for her unwavering kindness and her habit of giving small silver lockets to the patients as a symbol of hope. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Could her locket be one of them, a symbol of Clara's mercy? They returned to the asylum, focusing their search on what might have been Ilara's room. They found it tucked away in a quiet corner, smaller and less imposing than the others. Inside, beneath a loose floorboard, they discovered a small wooden box. Inside the box were more of the silver lockets, identical to Sarah's, and beneath them, a final, heart-wrenching journal. It belonged to Clara. Her entries spoke of the horrors she witnessed under Dr. Blackwood's reign, her growing despair at the suffering of the patients, and her deep compassion for Ilara. Clara wrote of trying to offer comfort and hope in the face of unimaginable cruelty, giving the lockets as a reminder of kindness in the darkness. The last entry was dated the day Ilara died. Clara's words were filled with grief and a profound sense of injustice. She wrote of a desperate act, a silent prayer offered with each locket she gave, a plea for peace and release for the tormented souls of Whispering Pines. As Maya held one of the lockets, her eyes welled up with tears. "I feel it," she whispered. "Her love, her compassion, it's woven into these." Suddenly they heard a faint sound, a soft, melodic humming. It was different from the chilling drone they had heard before. This humming was gentle, soothing. They followed the sound to the surgical wing. The shadowy figure was there, but it was different. It no longer radiated malice. Its form seemed less defined, almost translucent. The red glow in its eyes was gone, replaced by a soft, ethereal luminescence. Clara's humming seemed to resonate with the entity. As she hummed, the translucent figure seemed to soften, its rigid posture relaxing. Maya stepped forward, holding out one of the silver lockets. "This is for you," she said softly. "It's time to rest." As Maya offered the locket, a faint image flickered around the translucent figure. A young girl with large, luminous eyes and a gentle smile. Elara. The translucent figure reached out a wispy hand and gently took the locket. As its fingers closed around the silver, a wave of warmth washed over the room. The humming faded, replaced by a profound sense of peace. The translucent figure slowly dissolved, its light merging with the soft glow emanating from the lockets. The oppressive atmosphere of the surgical wing lifted completely. The cloying scent vanished. The feeling of dread was gone. They understood then. The shadowy figure wasn't just a malevolent entity. It was a manifestation of the collective suffering and pain endured within those walls, perhaps anchored by the tormented spirit of Dr. Blackwood, fueled by his guilt and the unresolved grief over his daughter. Clara's compassion, her light of mercy embodied in the lockets, had somehow soothed the tormented spirits, finally offering them peace. As they left Whispering Pines, the storm had passed. The first rays of dawn painted the sky with hues of hope. The asylum still stood silent and decaying, but it no longer felt menacing. It felt sad, a place where immense suffering had finally found a measure of peace, thanks to an unexpected act of kindness from the past. Sarah touched the locket around her neck. It no longer felt cold. It felt warm, a tangible reminder that even in the darkest of places, the light of compassion could prevail. The true horror of Whispering Pines wasn't just the suffering, but the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of mercy. The drive away from Whispering Pines felt different this time. The oppressive weight that had clung to the air during their previous visits was gone, replaced by a fragile sense of closure. Yet, the image of the woman in the window lingered in Sarah's mind, a subtle unease the newfound peace couldn't entirely dispel. Back at her cabin, the team meticulously reviewed their findings. Ben had managed to enhance the fleeting image captured in the window. It was undeniably a woman, her features indistinct, but her gaze seemingly fixed on their departing vehicle. Maya felt a faint echo of her presence, a lingering sadness that wasn't malevolent but deeply sorrowful. "It's different from the shadow," Maya explained, her brow furrowed. "There's no anger, no darkness, just a profound sense of loss." Their research continued, now focused on any mention of a woman who might have remained at Whispering Pines after its official closure or any other unexplained occurrences. They found nothing in the official records. The asylum was documented as being completely abandoned. However, Sarah stumbled upon a collection of local folklore, stories passed down through generations that hadn't made it into any official archives. One tale spoke of a woman named Eleanor, a former nurse at Whispering Pines who had been deeply devoted to the patients. The story claimed that Eleanor had lost her own child to the same illness that afflicted Elara Blackwood, and that she had never truly left the asylum, her spirit forever bound to the place where she had dedicated her life to caring for others. The description of Eleanor's unwavering compassion and her deep sorrow resonated with Maya's sensing of the lingering presence. Could the woman in the window be Eleanor? And if so, why was she still there? Driven by this new lead, Sarah felt compelled to return to Whispering Pines one last time, this time alone. The early morning mist clung to the mountains, shrouding the asylum in an ethereal veil. As she approached the silent structure, a sense of melancholy washed over her. The darkness seemed to have receded, but a profound sadness permeated the air. She walked through the familiar corridors, the silence now less oppressive and more contemplative. In Elara's former room, she found a small, tarnished music box tucked away beneath another loose floorboard. It played a simple, haunting melody, the same lullaby that Elias Thorne had mentioned in his journal, but without the chilling undertones. It sounded like a lullaby of sorrow. As the music box played, Sarah felt a presence near her, gentle and comforting. She turned slowly and saw her. A translucent figure of a woman stood near the window, her gaze soft and filled with an immeasurable sadness. It was the woman from the photograph Ben had enhanced, though now her features were clearer. It was Eleanor. Sarah felt no fear, only a deep empathy. "You're Eleanor," she whispered. The translucent figure didn't speak, but her sad eyes seemed to acknowledge Sarah. She gestured towards a corner of the room. Sarah followed her gaze and saw a collection of faded letters tied with a ribbon. Carefully, Sarah picked up the letters. They were addressed to Eleanor, written in a delicate, looping script. They were from her deceased child, filled with innocent affection and heartbreaking accounts of her illness. The last letter spoke of her longing for her mother and her fear of being forgotten. As Sarah read the final letter, tears welled up in her eyes. She understood. Eleanor wasn't trapped by malice, but by an overwhelming grief, a fear that her child would be forgotten. Her spirit remained tethered to the place where she had found purpose after her own loss, a place now intertwined with the memory of her child's suffering and the children she had cared for. Sarah looked at Eleanor, her heart aching with compassion. She gently began to speak, her voice soft and soothing. She told Eleanor that her child would never be forgotten, that her love and dedication to the patients of Whispering Pines had created a legacy of kindness that had even touched them, strangers from the future. She spoke of the peace that had come to the asylum, a peace partly born from the echoes of Eleanor's own compassion. As Sarah spoke, a soft, warm light began to emanate from the silver locket around her neck. The translucent figure of Eleanor watched, her sad eyes fixed on the locket. Slowly, a faint smile touched her lips, a smile tinged with sorrow but also with a hint of release. The music box wound down, its haunting melody fading into silence. As the last notes died away, the translucent figure of Eleanor began to fade, her form becoming less distinct, merging with the soft morning light filtering through the window. The feeling of profound sadness in the room began to dissipate, replaced by a quiet sense of acceptance. Sarah knew Eleanor was finally at peace, her spirit freed from the bonds of grief. The lingering echo in the window was gone. She left Whispering Pines that morning with a heavy heart, but also with a profound sense of hope. The asylum, once a symbol of terror and suffering, now held a different meaning for her. It was a place where darkness had been confronted by compassion, where the echoes of pain had finally begun to fade, not through force, but through understanding and empathy. The miracle of the lockets wasn't just their ability to ward off darkness. It was their connection to an enduring spirit of kindness, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable horror, the light of human compassion could offer solace and ultimately peace. Sarah never sought out another haunted location with the same morbid curiosity. Her experience at Whispering Pines had changed her. She understood that the stories of the haunted were often stories of profound suffering and unresolved pain, and that sometimes the greatest act of investigation wasn't to find a ghost, but to find a way to offer a measure of peace. The story of Whispering Pines went viral, captivating audiences with its blend of chilling horror and the unexpected miracle of mercy. Many were terrified, but many more were moved by the tale of compassion prevailing over darkness. Sarah became an advocate for understanding the human stories behind the hauntings, reminding people that even in the most frightening places, echoes of kindness could still resonate. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, when the wind whispered through the trees, Sarah would touch the silver locket around her neck and remember Eleanor, the grieving nurse, whose love had become a beacon of hope in the darkness of Whispering Pines. The lingering light of her compassion continued to shine, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit.